So thank you, Janet, so much for joining me here today. I think to kick us off, would you kind of talk about what you were doing, how you were involved with SYRCL as we went from kind of no wild and scenic South Yuba to a wild and scenic South Yuba?
Well, I had been office manager in the 90s
Okay.
when we got Tim Palmer along to write our very own report, Wild and Scenic Report, on the South Yuba because the Forest Service wasn't doing it. And we thought we would force their hand by getting Tim Palmer, who's an eminent travel writer, especially about rivers, to write our own South Yuba Wild and Scenic River report. And so I was office manager then went away for a while, but became as a major volunteer, ran auctions and all sorts of things. And then Sean asked me in 98 to become his second in command.
Okay.
So he was the ED, I was the whatever, deputy ED.
Yeah.
And I started right at the beginning of 1999 as the deputy director.
Right.
And that was the year that we decided that we should go for State Wild and Scenic again, because we had, not we as SYRCL, but the community had managed to get a 4-to-1 supervisor board that was pro-environment. And the first time that we had tried to get State Wild and Scenic, we did not have the supervisors on board with us. They voted no, it went nowhere.
Right.
So now, immediately upon them taking their seats in 99, we went for Wild and Scenic. We asked them for resolution because it was absolutely essential to have your local county supervisors on board for this thing. And so I was basically the person, was Izzy and John Regan and Sean and various others would go into a room and they would come out and they'd say, this is what we're going to do. You need to do this. It was things like get a screensaver together so that we can go down and put it on everybody's, computers in the Capitol. We're going to have a party. We're going to have a lobby day. We're going to have to do this, that, and the other. And, we're going to have to tell everybody about everything. And so I was the person who operationalized, for better or worse, the campaign. They'd come and say, do this. And it was like, seriously? By when? Like 3 days' time. So that was my role then. And then once we got Wild and Scenic, I became the director, I think maybe a year later.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and certainly I think we can say with a Wild and Scenic South Yuba that the campaign was successful and for
Yes.
the better. So looking back, what was it? What was happening in the river, in the community, national politics that kind of went from like we need to do something to Wild and Scenic is the answer. This is how we're going to protect this place.
Well, we had been fighting for 15 years against dam threat after dam threat. Roger will tell you more about the very early dam threats. When I came to this community straight from England, and I couldn't believe that the river wasn't protected. It was just dumbfounding that this wasn't a state park or something,
Right.
and that it was actually being actively threatened. It was inconceivable to me that you would have this thing of such great beauty and it could be under threat. And I think a lot of people had moved here because this river really made Nevada City stand out. I mean, there are a lot of dusty gold rush communities along Highway 49, but as far as I know, nobody has something like this. And it had attracted a lot of people in the first place, so they were already primed because they had moved here because of it to become part of a community, part of SYRCL, to protect it. And, throughout the early days, we had done an immense amount of community organizing. We had concerts at the herb shop that doesn't exist, the herb shop that doesn't exist anymore. But we had concerts all the time. We had membership dances. We were all young enough to dance. We had immense amounts of events and meetings. And we had also had things like, we had a private property owners committee. So even during the dark days when there was no hope of Wild and Scenic, we were courting property owners, telling them what Wild and Scenic status meant, mainly federal, actually, because that would have been the gold star.
Right.
But we put out basically newspapers and real big mailers telling them what Wild and Scenic was about. Yes, you will still be allowed to paint your house pink. This doesn't mean anything bad. It just means your house won't be inundated.
Right.
That somebody can come in from FERC and say, hey, there's going to be a dam built. And it was all about educating the community. I mean, we educated them constantly. So the community was primed.
Right.
And as soon as the Board of Supervisors balance shifted, Sean basically said, we can go for state. Let's do state wild and scenic. They'll have to manage it just as if it was federal. The agencies will have to manage it. Let's do it. Yeah. And we did it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So let's keep with that kind of community thread. You talked a little bit about property owners and the amount of education. How did local residents, the activists, how were people getting involved? And are there any particular memories that kind of stand out as the community really coming together around this fight?
During the campaign in '99, I'd say we activated as many human beings as we possibly could. Every store owner on the street or in town in the county would give us donations for our huge auction that was a major fundraiser. People would turn up to parties. We put on concerts in Western Gateway Park. We put on concerts in Pioneer Park. We were very, very upfront about it. And we got people down to every hearing in the Capitol. We had lobby days where high school students would come and old people. And, we had a lot of volunteers who, did things for us like draw maps. Ralph Hitchcock, who's 90-something now, he did this series of maps for us. I mean, this was pre-internet. Mm-hmm. And he showed where, Washington would be inundated. People would be coming into our office and going, wait a minute, that's my house.
Right.
That sort of thing. So we did, and I do want to stress the pre-internet days of this.
Yeah.
When we wanted to alert people to a congressional hearing or some hearing down there, we had to phone them.
Right.
We had giant phone trees. We had volunteers who would, they had their 10 people that they would talk to. We were constantly in the newspaper. Mm-hmm. We were, the other major thing that we had done, and this started with Kerry Timmer and probably Mary Hoy, the first director of SYRCL, we had become friends with the agencies. This was hugely important. Yeah. Dean Swickett of BLM, Ray Patton of State Parks. The Forest Service was a little bit more iffy, but we had alliances with them. Yeah. The Forest Service had actually been forced, because of our book, to do the east side and west side study of potential wild and scenic rivers in just before. So they had come out and said, yes, there's a huge chunk of the Yuba that is wild and scenic that should be designated. So we had them at our hearings. Right. Kerry Timmer had started going to the Chamber of Commerce meetings. The first day she arrived as director in the 90s, there was I can't remember who the group was, probably CabPro, but they basically said everybody in town needs to boycott this river vixen. Huh. It was a full-on attack, and she absolutely neutralized this. She went to, meeting after meeting, showing that we weren't, radical lunatics of some sort. So we'd either neutralized or become friends with the people who needed to support us, and we had the community big time behind us.
Right.
When we decided to go for wild and scenic, extraordinarily enough, Yuba County Water Agency, at this very moment, put out a press release saying, well, this is our plan for flood control down in the valley. 6 dams and a levee option. And one of the dams was at Edwards Crossing, 600 high-foot dam at Edwards Crossing. And the union reporter, Tim Amazu, came in and we showed him this saying, Yuba County Water Agency had totally played into our hands. And he listened to us and he went down the stairs from our old office. And all of a sudden, about 2 minutes later, he comes back up the stairs and he goes, wait a minute, a 600-foot high dam at Edwards Crossing? It's like, yes, this is what they're proposing. So, we had all sorts of people knowing what was going on and supporting our fight. And we were way smaller then.
Right.
You know, as I say, pre-internet, pre-film festival, pre-river monitoring, pre-many things.
Yeah, I mean, certainly that community education, that community buy-in, that relationship building, all of that friendship is huge. And so then talk to me about a little bit about that fight, and what were some of the biggest challenges? I mean, you've got the entire community, you've got friends at agencies, but you've still got to move this thing forward. What were some of the biggest challenges with that fight?
Well, there were always some property owners who were sort of knee-jerk against this. And they would always turn up to hearings and say, no, you know, we don't want it. We want to be able to paint our house pink or whatever it is. You know, this is a terrible thing. And so we had to always neutralize that with having property owners who we had educated for years turning up and saying, actually, no, I support this. My house is not going to be inundated, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that was something of a challenge, you know, getting over people's fears, quite frankly. Oddly, I think NID didn't like this at all. But they, as I recall, you know, they'd come and say, no, we don't like this. You know, it's going to be some sort of... NID was not, in those days, the same NID as it is nowadays. They didn't like it. So they would come along and say, no, we don't want this. But they were sort of neutralized by the federal agencies and state parks. So it was basically having to educate lawmakers. They had no idea where the Yuba was. They, you know, it's like, do I really want to put myself out there for this? And the big thing was that Great Davis needed cover. There had been terrible floods down in Yuba County, and flood control was the big issue. If we can't dam this river, how are we going to do flood control? Big time problem. And we proposed that there would be $110,000 or something like that, 90,000, I don't know, it was a lot of money put into the water bond that was going to be coming up. We put money in there to plan flood control. $110 million, I think. It was million.
Right, yeah.
Yes, it wasn't thousand, it was 110 million. And we put that in the water bond that had to yet be voted on by the people as a proposition or however those things get done. And that was a big one, giving them all cover, because they did not want to be accused 2 years down the road when a huge flood came again of being the ones who had stopped flood control.
Right.
And a couple of years later, when we were in lots of conversations about flood control with them, they all of a sudden came back and said, oh, here is our plan for levees, which have actually all been implemented.
Yeah.
So that was the obvious thing to do, as opposed to building a 600-foot high dam at Edwards Crossing and all the other dam proposals.
Right.
So we did have to give some reason to not be worried about flood control to all the lawmakers, because they did not want that to happen, which we didn't either.
Yeah, right, and that's fair. I mean, that is in so many ways, like the definition of the way these kinds of things work is it's a little give, a little take.
Precisely. It was a clever, I think it was someone from, I can't remember who it was, but it was someone outside our organization who we were working with, because we had Planning and Conservation League on our side, we had American Rivers on our side, you know, all of the Enviro organizations, and it was Barry someone from somewhere. He proposed this. And then we opened an office, post Wild and Scenic, post the vote, we opened an office down in Yuba County to get people to vote for the water bond down there, to point out what was in it for them. And I think it's the only water bond that Yuba County has ever voted for.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah, so we put our money where, you know, our bodies where our mouth was, basically.
Yeah, and showing up in those communities and saying, hey, listen, we also care.
Yeah, there's $110 million here, you need to vote for this thing.
Right.
And so they did.
That's great. All right, so, I mean, the community's rallied together, you've done some of the creative problem solving. Take us to that moment of the win, and when the designation was finally voted on and passed. What was that like?
Well, we had won every vote in every committee by about one vote. It was never like, oh yeah, 9 to 1 the other way or whatever. So we were all, I mean, you could hear the radios that people were listening to KVMR all around town. And we were up in our office going, please vote. It's like the final committee vote or whatever it was. And we were getting phone calls from John Regan and from Izzy about who's decided to do this and who's decided to do that. And basically, we had listened to the vote. We got it. And you could hear cheers all over town.
Right.
And from my point of view, it was like, oh my God, I've got to plan 2 parties. Okay, on to the next thing. It was no letdown for me.
Really?
No. So we had a giant party in the Pioneer Park the following Saturday afternoon, and then a raving party at Roger Hicks's house in the evening.
Yes.
Where the senator who had carried the bill came and all sorts of things.
Right.
It was very cool.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, of course, there's the vote, and then you've got to wait a few months for the signature, and then there's a whole other year where that water bond passes, which is why we're celebrating in 2026 and not 2024.
Yeah, it didn't come into play for a year.
Yeah.
But yes, we had to get the governor's signature and so on. But we had already talked to him. We thought we would get it.
Yeah.
We had big allies in the Senate at that point. John Burton, who was the leader pro tem, was a very big ally of ours, which helped dramatically.
Yeah. So now thinking about it, looking forward, 25 years later, what do you think the designation means for the community, for the river, for this place?
Well, we could immediately start doing things that other river organizations had been doing for years. We could start monitoring the river. I mean, there were things that we couldn't do because the river was under threat.
Right.
For 16 years. So we started a river monitoring program. We started an education program. We started, just to be able to breathe and do things that we hadn't been able to do. We had always been about restoring salmon.
Right.
But again, of course, we couldn't really go for it. In fact, I remember before we got Wild and Scenic designation, before the vote, before it was final, we went on a very small retreat, and it was like, okay, what next? We've got to be ready with what next. Right. So I remember at the party in Pioneer Park, it was like, this battle took 16 years, and now we're going to restore salmon. We were ready with saying what we were going to do next.
You had an answer, yeah.
So all of the other programs like monitoring and the education program and so forth was, trips down the river to see the salmon was all about restoring salmon. We were ready to go.
Yeah, that's great.
So, it's given us breathing room. We've been able to start. I mean, we named the film festival after Wild and Scenic because we then wanted to really ram it home that Wild and Scenic brought economic value to the community.
Right.
That it wasn't about whether your house was going to be pink or not. It was about, hey, we've brought economic, growth to this community through Wild and Scenic.
Right.
So that was really important, actually.
So famously at least in my mind, so famously for the timing of the film fest, winter, when there wasn't something going on.
I mean, I was determined, because that was sort of my baby. It was like, okay, how can we really show this? And it's like, yeah, we're going to do it in winter when there's nothing else going on, and we're going to really have it throughout the town. Right. We're going to have, fireside sessions at every cafe. We're going to have art in every possible building. We're going to go into the Odd Fellows Hall. We're going to go in, we started small in 2 venues, and it was like, no, our plan, I found the 5-year plan recently, and it was, very carefully calibrated so that we took the town over.
Yeah.
We're going to have flags up and down the street. Everybody is going to want this.
Yeah.
And then, of course, Grass Valley came to us and said, can we have it too?
Which is such a sign of success.
Precisely.
When the next Hanover was like, hey, we want a little bit of that as well.
I actually remember going to meet, it's always all guys, but, they were all saying, well, who comes to the film festival, how do you, this, that, and the other. And I went, well, this is the breakdown of where people are coming from, by state and so on and so forth. And they said, well, how do you know that? And I said, well, we have a database. Carlisle was the database queen, and we knew where everyone came from. We knew how many out-of-towners there were. And they went, oh, okay. Because I don't think anyone in those days was recording in this way. So we wowed them, and they courted us for ages before, I think, whoever it was, Melinda or maybe someone, Caleb. it said yes.
Yeah, could kind of, make that
Yes.
leap and sort of expand
Yeah, precisely.
in that way.
Yeah.
So I've got one more question that we hadn't sort of talked about earlier, but it was inspired and asked Sean and really liked it. So as I think about the future of the organization and, having a thing to build community and mobilize the community around, the two that come to mind for me is the North Yuba and the topic that everybody's been talking about for years, and passage at Inglebright. And so my question for you is, thinking about similar scale, similar magnitude, similar time frame kind of initiatives to do things as an organization, do you think the recipe is roughly the same 25, 30 years later, or does it look a little different?
I think the Englebright thing remains the same.
Yeah.
And a lot of the focus of SYRCL's work has been about salmon.
Yeah.
I hate to say it, but I don't know all that much about the North Yuba, except that you don't have the community. The South Yuba was so visceral for so many people.
Right.
And I think, you don't have to put this in the thing, but I do think that
Yeah.
I do think that moving away from the South Yuba is problematic in terms of a lot of people's understanding of who SYRCL is,
Right.
and why they support it. So I don't know that I'm that attracted to the North Yuba.
Interesting. Yeah.
It's not where I lived.
Right.
So you'd have to do a few focus groups, I think, before you really went for that.
Yeah.
Really, you'd have to also go up to Downeyville and places and see whether or not they're into it. But there aren't the numbers of people. Not everybody took their children and taught them to swim in the South Yuba.
Yeah, it's a very
and it's warmer too.
Yes. Oh yeah.
So
it's a different. Yeah,
it's different.
It'd be a very different thing. We have a good presence in Downeyville, Sierra City. I mean,
Good.
they know us with our forest health work. They know us well with all of our meta restoration, salmon reintroduction, all of those projects.
But there aren't very many of them.
There aren't very many. And I think my sense is that the process, sort of the recipe to get there, probably is actually fairly similar, in that you couldn't just rely on the internet. You'd need to be in living rooms because it is such a small community. So.
Yeah, and you'd also have to mobilize the people here to understand why.
Right.
Really importantly.
Yeah.
Why you're taking that on. I mean, they really wanted us to be focused on the South Yuba. Mm-hmm. There was a point at which they were going to close the state parks down under Jason. And, SYRCL seemed to be a little bit apprehensive about taking that on. And it was like, if you can't take that on, saving our state parks, what is the point?
Right.
So I think you always have to be assuring people that you are on the South Yuba.
Right.
That this is a major concern. You have to be very clear about that.
Right.
It's the key. It has been the key mission. Obviously you don't put this in the thing, but you've got some major donors out there who are going to die.
Right.
And you need to be assuring them that why they joined 30 years ago and why they've continued to give money, that this is what you're...
It's still, yeah.
Yeah, you cannot... I see organizations do this all the time. It's like, no, don't go off there.
Right.
Without making sure that everybody understands why and how it benefits here.
Right. And I think that is the kind of the challenge and opportunity, is I think about it in a lot of ways, is that maintaining the South Yuba and staying very focused and present and leading in everything, whatever happens to come up as it relates to the South Yuba. And, as our work has expanded, especially the restoration work,
yes.
We find ourselves where there are places where there's opportunity.
Good.
And, balancing and, are frankly requested, like, hey, we've got this issue here, can you help?
And again, I remember as soon as Wild and Scenic happened and we won, it was like, oh, they're the people to go to win everything. Mm-hmm. And medical marijuana people would come to us.
Right.
It's like, no, actually, our mission is this.
Yeah.
And I think you're a very different character to me and Sean. You're actually trained to think about restoration. We knew nothing about the science. We were into community organizing. And I think you must not lose that.
Yeah.
It's very important to get, sidetracked. It's easy it's easy to get sidetracked into meadow restoration and stuff and not be explaining why this is important. And I hate to say it to the South Yuba, but it's important
to the watershed. Yeah, absolutely.
because I know some people who left, took you out of the wells when we got very heavily into salmon and something or other under Jason. It was like, no, that's not what I want my money to go to.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, that communication piece is
really important.
Really important.
And even salmon, to some degree, is you have to reassure people that you're definitely going to make sure the water quality is good, that they'll always be able to take their grandchildren down there, that it remains exquisitely beautiful, not overcrowded, not on fire.
That's it for the sort of formal questions,
Great.
Unless you've got other things you want to share.
One thing, actually,
Yes.
end thing, you were saying about something I remember.
Yeah.
One of the times that the sort of steering committee of the campaign came out of the room, their discussions, and said to me, we need a screensaver because we're going to do a lobby day and we want to give the screensaver to every office. Democrat, Republican, doesn't matter. And of course, in those days, it wasn't easy to take pictures, photos, get them onto a computer and make them into something that you could put on a disk and it would scroll. It was not easy. And we did it in a weekend. I think it was Joe Crane was a wonderful volunteer. And we then armed ourselves with however many hundred, of these things. And we went to every congressional office, everybody in Sacramento. And apparently you could walk into anybody's office for about 2 weeks before they banned it and see pictures of the South Yuba on everyone's screensavers. And it was like, here's a screensaver of a beautiful river. Why don't you put it on your computer? And they did. Even people who were not going to vote for us had it. And at some point or another, I think they banned all screensavers forever after, actually. But that was wonderful. We had high schoolers outside with signs, and it was tremendously wonderful. Very charming people going into these offices.
Yeah.
It was great.
That idea of, just getting there, being in the space and demonstrating, showing people what was going to be lost.
Precisely. It was really,
it's hard not to be moved.
Precisely. So that was a great memory, actually. Yeah. Great day.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Amongst many great days. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you so much.
No, my pleasure.
Yeah. And